The afternoon sun beat down on Main Street as Andre Taylor stepped out of his car. After 15 months deployed overseas, being back in his hometown felt both familiar and strange. He adjusted his plain blue t-shirt and locked his car, heading toward the small coffee shop on the corner. The neighborhood had changed since he left. New storefronts, fresh paint. But Riverside Brew remained exactly as he remembered. Andre had spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL, rising through the ranks with dedication and exceptional skill. His team members often joked that he could navigate through enemy territory blindfolded. But today, all he wanted was a good cup of coffee and maybe one of those blueberry muffins he'd been dreaming about during his last mission. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. The coffee shop was moderately busy with the afternoon crowd, a mix of students with laptops, business people on break, and locals catching up with neighbors. The familiar smell of freshly ground coffee beans and baked goods immediately brought a smile to Andre's face. "Be with you in just a moment," called out the barista, a young woman with vibrant red hair tied back in a ponytail. Andre nodded and stepped to the side, scrolling through messages on his phone. His sister had texted asking if he'd made it back safely, and his former commanding officer had sent a link to a veteran support group that met nearby. The door jingled again. Officer Roy Peterson walked in, his police uniform crisp and his posture rigid. He scanned the room with practiced efficiency before his gaze landed on Andre. Something in the officer's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. His eyes narrowed and his hand instinctively moved closer to his belt. Andre, trained to notice subtle changes in body language, caught the movement but didn't react. He simply returned to looking at his phone, typing a quick reply to his sister. "Excuse me," came a stern voice. Andre looked up to find Officer Peterson standing uncomfortably close to him. "I need to see some identification." The coffee shop quieted as several patrons glanced over. Andre blinked, momentarily confused by the abrupt demand. "May I ask why?" Andre replied calmly, his voice steady and respectful. "Just routine," Officer Peterson said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "There have been reports of suspicious activity in the area." An older woman at a nearby table lowered her newspaper, watching the interaction with a frown. A college student removed his headphones, his fingers hovering over his phone. "I'm just waiting to order coffee," Andre explained, gesturing toward the counter where the barista now watched with concern. "I don't believe I've done anything suspicious." Officer Peterson's jaw tightened. "When an officer asks for ID, you provide it. That's how things work around here." The implied meaning behind "around here" wasn't lost on Andre or the other customers. A middle-aged man in a business suit shifted uncomfortably in his seat, exchanging glances with the woman across from him. "With all due respect, officer," Andre said, maintaining his composure, "I understand the law requires reasonable suspicion for you to demand identification. I've simply entered a coffee shop and haven't done anything that would warrant suspicion." The officer's face flushed slightly. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for. What description would that be?" Andre asked, knowing full well what the answer likely was. Officer Peterson didn't respond directly. Instead, he took another step closer, using his height to try to intimidate Andre. "I don't appreciate your attitude. Are you refusing to comply with a police officer?" By now, the entire coffee shop had fallen silent. The barista had stopped making drinks and was whispering something to her coworker. An elderly gentleman in the corner slowly reached for his phone and began recording the interaction. Andre took a slow, deep breath. During his SEAL training, he'd learned to remain calm under extreme pressure. Gunfire, explosions, life-threatening situations. This was different, but he called on that same discipline now. "I'm not refusing anything, officer," he said evenly. "I'm simply asking for clarification. I've just returned home after serving overseas and I stopped for coffee. That's all." Something flickered across Officer Peterson's face, perhaps surprise at the mention of military service, but it quickly hardened again into suspicion. "Military, huh? Let me see those military credentials then," he demanded, his voice carrying across the now silent room. Andre reached slowly into his back pocket, telegraphing his movements clearly. "I'm going to reach for my wallet," he narrated calmly, a habit formed from encounters in conflict zones where sudden movements could be fatal. As he retrieved his wallet, a young woman at a corner table stood up and approached. "Excuse me, officer," she said hesitantly. "I've been sitting here for the past hour and this gentleman just walked in." He hasn't done anything wrong. Officer Peterson barely glanced at her. Ma'am, please return to your seat. This is police business. It doesn't look like police business, said the elderly man who was recording. It looks like harassment to me. The tension in the room was palpable as Andre carefully extracted his military ID and held it out. Officer Peterson snatched it, examining it closely as if expecting to find it fake. Navy SEAL? Officer Peterson read aloud, his tone suggesting disbelief. You expect me to believe that? A flicker of frustration crossed Andre's face, but his voice remained measured. You can verify it if you'd like. My commanding officer's contact information is in my phone. The barista, who had been watching the entire exchange, finally spoke up. His coffee's on the house, she announced loudly. We appreciate your service. Several patrons nodded or murmured in agreement. Officer Peterson looked around, suddenly aware of the many disapproving faces and several phones directed his way. Everything all right in here? A new voice joined the conversation as another police officer stepped into the coffee shop. Officer Chen, a veteran cop with 20 years on the force, surveyed the scene with experienced eyes. Just checking this individual's identification, Officer Peterson replied stiffly, still holding Andre's military ID. Says he's a Navy SEAL. Officer Chen approached and glanced at the ID. His eyebrows raised slightly. Special Warfare Operator Taylor, he read, using the official title. He handed the ID back to Andre with respect. What brings you to our town, sir? It's my hometown, Andre replied, accepting his ID. Just back on leave, hoping to catch up with family. Officer Chen nodded thoughtfully, then turned to his colleague. Peterson, I need to speak with you outside. His tone was professional but left no room for argument. As the two officers stepped outside, the coffee shop erupted in whispers. The elderly man who had been recording approached Andre. I got that whole thing on video, he said quietly. That wasn't right what he did, Andre sighed. It's not the first time. He looked around, at the concerned faces of the other customers, and felt a strange mix of gratitude for their support and weariness that such incidents still happened. The barista called out his name, despite never having asked for it when he ordered. Large dark roast for Andre, and I threw in one of those blueberry muffins too. As Andre collected his order, Officer Chen returned alone. He approached Andre with a respectful distance. I want to apologize for my colleague's behavior, he said, loud enough for others to hear. That's not how we're trained to interact with the public, and certainly not how we should treat those who serve our country. Andre nodded in acknowledgement. I appreciate that. Officer Peterson will be returning to the station, Officer Chen continued. I'd like to get your contact information if you're willing. This incident will be reviewed. As Andre provided his information, he noticed the mix of emotions on the faces around him: outrage, sympathy, and, unfortunately, lack of surprise. This wasn't an isolated incident, and both he and everyone in the coffee shop knew it. Enjoy your coffee, sir, Officer Chen said before leaving, and welcome home. Andre found a seat by the window, watching as Officer Chen drove away. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street, and for a moment Andre thought about all the places he'd been, all the dangers he'd faced. Sometimes the battles at home were the hardest ones to fight. The elderly man who had recorded the incident stopped by his table. My grandson is thinking about joining the Navy, he said. Mind if I join you for a few minutes? I'd love to hear about your experience. Andre smiled and gestured to the empty chair across from him. I'd be happy to share, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. Sometimes connections formed in the most unexpected moments, even in the aftermath of conflict. The next morning, Andre woke to the buzzing of his phone. He'd crashed at his sister's place after spending the evening catching up with her family. His young niece and nephew had bombarded him with questions about his travels, carefully avoiding the harder topics that their mother had warned them not to bring up. Andre reached for his phone and squinted at the screen. Several text messages had come in, along with notifications from social media apps he rarely used. The first message was from Theo, the elderly man from the coffee shop. Video getting attention. Local news asking questions. Hope that's okay. Andre sat up and ran a hand over his face. He hadn't expected this. During his conversation with Theo yesterday, the man had mentioned posting the video online but had promised to blur Andre's face. Apparently, it had struck a nerve with viewers. He scrolled through the other messages. Friends from high school he hadn't spoken to in years, former neighbors, even his old football coach, all expressing outrage at what they'd seen in the video and checking if he was okay. The last notification was from a local news station, requesting an interview. Andre set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. 12 years in the military had taught him to choose his battles carefully. This wasn't what he'd planned for his leave, but maybe it was the battle that had found him. His sister knocked gently on the door before poking her head in. "You're on the local news," she said, her expression a mix of concern and pride. "Breakfast is ready when you are." Downstairs, his brother-in-law had the news playing on the kitchen TV. Andre's nephew sat at the table, eyes glued to the screen where a reporter stood outside the police station. Video that has gone viral locally shows Officer Roy Peterson confronting a customer, later identified as a decorated Navy SEAL, at Riverside Brew yesterday afternoon. Witnesses claim the officer had no cause for the interaction. The footage showed parts of yesterday's incident with Andre's face blurred but Officer Peterson clearly visible. The reporter continued, "Police Chief Williams has issued a statement saying the department is investigating the incident and that Officer Peterson has been placed on administrative leave pending review." Andre's sister set a plate of pancakes in front of him. "Eat," she said firmly. "Then we'll figure this out." His phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously, "Mr. Taylor, this is Lieutenant Diane Rivera from the police department. I was hoping we could meet today to discuss yesterday's incident." Andre agreed to meet her at noon, then turned his attention to breakfast and his excited niece and nephew, who seemed torn between pride that their uncle was on TV and confusion about why someone would treat him badly. At 11:45, Andre parked outside the police station. He sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. This wasn't his first encounter with prejudice, not by a long shot. Growing up in this town, he'd faced it from teachers who underestimated him, store owners who followed him around, and yes, police officers who seemed to find his very existence suspicious. Joining the SEALs hadn't erased those experiences, but it had given him perspective. He'd worked alongside men and women from every background imaginable, trusting them with his life and having them trust him with theirs. He'd seen the best and worst of humanity in war zones across the world, and he'd learned that sometimes the most powerful response to hate wasn't more hate, but something else entirely. He took a deep breath and headed inside. Lieutenant Rivera met him in the lobby. She was a tall woman with short cropped hair and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Taylor," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "Let's talk in my office." As they walked through the station, Andre felt eyes on him. Some curious, some embarrassed, some respectful. He kept his back straight and his expression neutral, the same way he carried himself in unfamiliar territory overseas. Rivera's office was small but organized, with certificates on the walls and family photos on her desk. She closed the door and gestured for him to sit. "First, I want to apologize on behalf of the department," she began. "What happened yesterday shouldn't have happened." Andre nodded but said nothing. "I've reviewed the footage, both from civilian recordings and Officer Peterson's body camera," Rivera continued. "There was no justification for him to approach you or demand identification." "This isn't just about me," Andre said finally. "I have training for high-stress situations. I have credentials that made Officer Chen back off. What about the people in our community who don't have those advantages?" Rivera leaned forward. "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you specifically. We've been working on a community policing initiative for the past year. Progress has been slower than I'd hoped." She pulled a folder from her desk. "Officer Peterson has a history of similar complaints. Not enough to trigger disciplinary action under our current policies, but a pattern nonetheless. Your case, with its clear video evidence and your military background, has created an opportunity for change." Andre raised an eyebrow. "What kind of change?" "Chief Williams is under pressure. The mayor called this morning. The video has over 50,000 views." Rivera tapped her pen against the desk. "We need to revise our training protocols and accountability measures, and I think you could help us." Before Andre could respond, there was a knock at the door. Officer Chen entered, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to interrupt, Lieutenant. Chief wants to see you both in his office, and..." He hesitated. "Officer Peterson is here too." The walk to the chief's office felt longer than it was. Andre could feel tension radiating from Officer Peterson, who stood stiffly by the wall, avoiding eye contact. Chief Williams, a heavy-set man with graying hair and deep lines around his eyes, gestured for everyone to sit. "Mr. Taylor," the chief began, "I want to apologize for yesterday's incident. It falls far short of the standards I expect from my officers." Andre nodded, waiting. "Officer Peterson has something he'd like to say," the chief continued, giving Peterson a pointed look. Peterson cleared his throat. His face was flushed, and Andre couldn't tell if it was from embarrassment, anger, or both. "I apologize for my conduct yesterday," Peterson said, his voice tight. "My approach was inappropriate." The words sounded rehearsed and hollow. Andre studied the man's face, recognizing the defensiveness in his posture. This wasn't genuine remorse. This was a man going through the motions to save his job. "Thank you for that," Andre said quietly. Then, addressing the chief, "What happens now?" Chief Williams sighed. "Officer Peterson will undergo additional training. He'll be on administrative duty for the next 2 weeks and—" "That's it?" Andre interrupted, his voice still calm but firm. 2 weeks of desk duty and some training and everything goes back to normal?" The room fell silent. Lieutenant Rivera watched Andre with newfound interest. "This isn't just about one incident," Andre continued. "From what Lieutenant Rivera tells me, there's a pattern here. And I'm guessing I'm not the first person to sit in this office discussing Officer Peterson's conduct." Chief Williams shifted uncomfortably. "We have procedures." "I understand procedures," Andre cut in. "I've spent my career following them. But procedures are meant to solve problems, not hide them." He leaned forward. "Yesterday I was just getting coffee. But what if I had reacted differently? What if I'd gotten angry or defensive? How would that situation have ended?" Officer Peterson's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "I've led men and women in combat," Andre continued. "When someone on my team makes a mistake that puts others at risk, we don't just note it and move on. We address it directly, we learn from it, and we make sure it doesn't happen again." Chief Williams studied Andre for a long moment. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Taylor?" Andre looked directly at Officer Peterson. "I'm suggesting that Officer Peterson spend some time with me. Not in an office, not in a training room. Out in the community." Peterson's head snapped up, his expression a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Lieutenant Rivera mentioned a community policing initiative," Andre explained. "Let Officer Peterson work with me on that. Let him see the neighborhood through my eyes, and let me understand the challenges of his job." Rivera leaned forward, intrigued. "The Youth Center on Maple Street has been asking for police involvement in their mentorship program. It could be a starting point." Chief Williams considered this. "That's unconventional." "So is having one of your officers go viral for harassing a Navy SEAL," Andre replied evenly. A flicker of what might have been respect crossed Peterson's face. The chief glanced between them, then nodded slowly. 2 months. You'll work with Lieutenant Rivera on the community initiative. Both of you." He looked at Peterson. "This isn't optional." As they left the chief's office, Peterson stopped Andre in the hallway. The officer's expression was guarded, but there was something else there too. Uncertainty, perhaps. "Why are you doing this?" Peterson asked. "You could file a complaint, talk to the media, make things difficult for me. Why?" "This?" Andre considered the question. In the field, he'd learned that understanding your adversary was often the first step to either defeating them or turning them into an ally. "Because filing complaints doesn't change minds," he said finally. "And because I think you're more than what I saw yesterday." Peterson's expression remained skeptical, but he nodded slowly. As Andre walked out of the station into the bright afternoon sunlight, his phone buzzed with another message from Theo. "Meeting at community center tonight about police relations. Your video sparked something. People are ready to talk. Will you come?" Andre paused on the steps, looking back at the police station and then out at the town he'd grown up in. The battle he hadn't planned for was just beginning, but for the first time he felt like real change might be possible. The community center hummed with voices as Andre pushed through the double doors. He was 15 minutes early for the meeting, but the main room was already packed. People from all corners of the neighborhood had shown up. Young parents with children in tow, elderly folks leaning on canes, teenagers in school sports jerseys, and local business owners still wearing their work clothes. Theo waved from near the front, gesturing to an empty seat he'd saved. As Andre made his way through the crowd, people turned to look. Some nodded in recognition. Others whispered to their neighbors. The video had clearly made the rounds. Didn't expect this many people, Andre said as he settled in beside Theo. The older man chuckled. Been a long time coming. Your coffee shop showdown was just the spark. He nodded toward the back of the room. And look who else decided to show up. Andre turned to see Lieutenant Rivera entering, followed by two other officers in uniform. Officer Peterson was not among them. Rivera caught Andre's eye and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The community center director, Mrs. Washington, stepped up to the microphone. A respected figure who had run after-school programs for 3 decades, her presence immediately quieted the room. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began. What happened at Riverside Brew has started an important conversation, but this isn't just about one incident. It's about building the community we want to live in. For the next hour, people lined up to speak. A high school teacher described how her students felt unsafe walking home. A shop owner talked about police taking too long to respond to calls in certain neighborhoods. A teenager explained how he'd been stopped 3 times in 1 month while riding his bike home from basketball practice. Andre listened, recognizing patterns from his own youth. The same issues had existed then, but people had stayed quiet, accepting them as unchangeable facts of life. When Lieutenant Rivera took the microphone, the room tensed. I'm here to listen, she said simply. I can't fix everything overnight, and I won't make promises I can't keep. But I will commit to working with this community on solutions. She paused, then added, and I believe we have an opportunity for a new kind of partnership. She explained the community policing initiative, then surprised the room by mentioning the arrangement with Andre and Officer Peterson. Sometimes change happens in unexpected ways, she concluded. After the meeting broke into smaller discussion groups, Andre found himself surrounded by people sharing stories and asking questions. It was nearly 11 when he finally headed for the door. Exhausted but hopeful, Lieutenant Rivera caught up with him in the parking lot. Officer Peterson will meet you at the youth center tomorrow at 9, she said. He's not thrilled about this arrangement, Andre smiled slightly. Didn't think he would be. This could go very wrong, Rivera warned. Peterson's pride is hurt, and he's got 20 years of habits that won't change overnight. I've trained with more difficult partners, Andre replied. Rivera studied him for a moment. You know, most people in your position would have just filed a lawsuit and been done with it. Andre looked up at the stars, thinking of the nights in distant deserts when the sky seemed endless and problems back home felt small and far away. I didn't join the SEALs to fight for some abstract idea of America. I joined to fight for the real thing, flaws and all. The youth center on Maple Street had once been a neglected municipal building with peeling paint and broken windows. Now, thanks to community fundraising and volunteer work, it served as a safe haven for neighborhood kids. Basketball courts out back, computer lab inside, and dedicated staff who knew every child by name. Andre arrived 15 minutes early the next morning, parking his sister's borrowed car in the nearly empty lot. He was surprised to see Officer Peterson's cruiser already there. Inside, he found Peterson awkwardly standing in the hallway, still in full uniform, looking out of place among the colorful murals painted by local kids. You're early, Andre observed. Peterson shrugged, figured I'd get the lay of the land. The center's director, Mr. Ramsey, emerged from his office with a grin that didn't quite mask his surprise at seeing a police officer in his hallway. A former college basketball player with a gentle demeanor that belied his imposing height, Ramsey had transformed the center during his 5 years as director. Andre Taylor, he exclaimed, grabbing Andre's hand and pulling him into a quick hug. Your sister told me you were back in town, but I didn't expect to see you here. This is Officer Peterson, Andre said. We're working together on the community policing initiative. Ramsey's eyebrows rose slightly as he connected the dots, but his smile never faltered as he shook Peterson's hand. Welcome to our little corner of chaos. The morning group will be here in about 20 minutes. Mostly middle schoolers today. They come here before school for breakfast and some homework help. He led them on a quick tour, pointing out the computer lab, the small library, the game room, and the kitchen where volunteers were preparing breakfast. Peterson followed silently, his expression unreadable. What exactly are we supposed to be doing here? Peterson finally asked when Ramsey stepped away to help a volunteer. Building bridges, Andre replied, getting to know the kids. letting them get to know you as something other than a uniform. Peterson frowned. I didn't become a cop to be a babysitter. No, you became a cop to serve and protect, Andre countered. These kids are who you're serving and protecting. Before Peterson could respond, the front doors burst open and a wave of energy flooded the center. As 24 middle schoolers arrived, backpacks bouncing and voices echoing down the hallway, they headed straight for the kitchen, drawn by the smell of pancakes and bacon. A few kids recognized Andre from his previous visits and ran over, excitedly asking about his cool Navy job. They stopped short when they noticed Peterson, their expressions instantly changing from excitement to wariness. This is Officer Peterson, Andre said. He's going to be hanging out with us today. The kids exchanged glances, then mumbled reluctant hellos before hurrying to join their friends in the breakfast line. See what I mean? Peterson said quietly. They're already afraid of me. They're cautious, Andre corrected. There's a difference. After breakfast, the kids split into groups, some for homework help, others for a basketball clinic in the gym. Andre steered Peterson toward the basketball group, figuring physical activity might break down some barriers. In the gym, Coach Wilson was organizing teams when he spotted them. His face lit up at the sight of Andre but fell slightly when he noticed Peterson. Extra hands are always welcome, Wilson said after introductions. Officer, can you help with the layup drill? Andre, take the passing station. For the first 20 minutes, Peterson stood stiffly to the side, mechanically bouncing the ball back to kids who missed their shots. The children kept their distance, focusing on the drill rather than engaging. Then a small boy named Tyler missed 3 shots in a row and slumped in frustration. Here, Peterson said, surprising everyone, including himself. Your elbows locked. Try it like this. He demonstrated a smoother motion, then handed the ball back. Tyler hesitated, then copied the movement. The ball sailed through the net. That's it, Peterson said, a hint of a smile cracking his stern demeanor. Again. By the end of the hour, Peterson had shed his jacket and was demonstrating proper form to a small group of attentive kids. The tension in his shoulders had eased slightly, and once or twice, Andre caught him almost smiling when a particularly difficult shot went in. As the kids gathered their things to head to school, Tyler approached Peterson. Are you coming back tomorrow? He asked. Peterson glanced at Andre, then back at Tyler. I think so, yes. After the kids left, Mr. Ramsey invited them to his office for coffee. I have to admit, he said, pouring 3 cups. When Lieutenant Rivera called to explain this arrangement, I was skeptical, especially when I realized which officer was involved. Peterson stiffened. You know about me? Ramsey nodded. This is a small community, officer. Word gets around. He handed Peterson a cup. But I believe in second chances. These kids need to see police officers as people they can trust, not people they should fear. It's not that simple, Peterson muttered. No, it's not, Ramsey agreed, but it's necessary. As they were leaving, Peterson paused by the bulletin board in the hallway, studying a faded photograph. That's the center's first basketball team, Andre explained, joining him. 1992. Peterson nodded slowly. I know. I was on it. He pointed to a skinny boy in the back row, his face half hidden behind taller teammates. That's me. Andre looked at him in surprise. You grew up around here? 2 blocks over on Pine Street, Peterson confirmed. Left as soon as I could. Didn't come back until I joined the force. His finger moved to the coach in the photo. Mr. Wilson coached me too. Probably doesn't remember. Something clicked into place for Andre. This neighborhood has changed a lot since then. Peterson's expression darkened. Yes, it has. They walked to their cars in silence, the morning's small breakthrough overshadowed by the weight of history, both personal and communal. Same time tomorrow? Andre asked. Peterson hesitated, then nodded. I'll be here. As Andre drove away, he caught sight of Peterson in his rearview mirror, still standing in the parking lot, looking back at the youth center with an expression Andre couldn't quite read. The battle lines were shifting, becoming less clear. And that, Andre thought, might be the first real sign of progress. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that became almost comfortable. Mornings at the youth center, afternoons with Lieutenant Rivera planning community events and occasional patrols through neighborhoods that Peterson had previously only visited when responding to calls. Andre watched as small changes appeared in Peterson's approach. The stiff posture gradually relaxed. The reflexive hand-to-holster movement when approaching groups of teenagers slowly disappeared. The children at the youth center no longer fell silent when he entered a room. But beneath the surface, Andre sensed resistance. Peterson was going through the motions, following orders, but the real barriers remained untouched. On a rainy Thursday morning, Andre arrived at the youth center to find it unusually quiet. A pipe had burst overnight, closing the building for repairs. Mr. Ramsey stood under the awning, redirecting disappointed kids to the library 2 blocks away. "Sorry you came out for nothing," Ramsey told them. "We should be back up and running tomorrow." Peterson checked his watch. "I guess I'll head to the station then." "Actually," Andre said, "I have a better idea." 20 minutes later, they pulled up outside a small diner on the edge of town. Tony's glowed in faded neon above the entrance. "Best breakfast in the county," Andre explained. Leading the way inside, the diner was busy with the morning rush. Truck drivers, hospital workers ending night shifts, and locals huddled over steaming coffee cups. Conversations quieted briefly as Peterson entered in uniform, then resumed with a slightly different tone. A heavy-set man with a salt and pepper beard emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His weathered face broke into a wide smile when he spotted Andre. "Look what the tide washed in," he boomed, hurrying over. "The prodigal son returns." "Hey, Uncle Tony." Andre grinned, accepting a bone-crushing hug. "Not my uncle," he explained to Peterson. "Everyone just calls him that." Tony sized up Peterson with a quick glance. "Bringing the law into my establishment? Must be serious business." "Just breakfast," Andre assured him. "Got time to feed a couple of hungry public servants?" "For you? Always." Tony led them to a corner booth away from the main crowd. "Coffee's coming. Know what you want or need menus?" "2 specials," Andre replied. "Extra bacon for him," he added, nodding toward Peterson. As Tony walked away, Peterson raised an eyebrow. "You come here often?" "My dad brought me here every Saturday morning growing up," Andre said, looking around the diner with fondness. "After he passed, Tony kind of looked out for me. First job was washing dishes in that kitchen." Peterson nodded but said nothing, his eyes scanning the diner with the habitual alertness of a veteran cop. Tony returned with coffee and settled into the booth beside Andre. "So, Navy man, how long you home for this time?" "Another 3 weeks, then back to Virginia for training." "This one giving you trouble?" Tony asked, jerking his thumb toward Peterson. Andre chuckled. "We're working together on a community project." Tony's eyebrows shot up and he studied Peterson more carefully. "That right? Well, any friend of Andre's gets the good bacon. The extra crispy stuff I save for special occasions." After Tony left to check on their food, Peterson stirred his coffee slowly. "Everyone in this town seems to know you. I grew up here," Andre shrugged. "Small towns have long memories. Some longer than others," Peterson muttered. Andre watched him for a moment. "Something's been eating at you since we started this. More than just wounded pride from the coffee shop." Peterson's jaw tightened. "Just doing my job." "No," Andre shook his head. "There's something else. That day at the youth center, when you saw that old photo, something changed. Their food arrived," momentarily pausing the conversation. When they were alone again, Peterson pushed his eggs around the plate. "You want to know what changed?" he finally said, his voice low. "When I was a kid, that neighborhood was different. Working class. Families who'd been there for generations. My dad worked at the mill, came home tired every night, but we got by." He took a sip of coffee. "Then the mill closed. People lost jobs. Houses got foreclosed. The neighborhood started changing. Crime went up. And suddenly, we were the ones who didn't belong anymore." Andre listened quietly, seeing the pieces come together. "My dad was jumped walking home one night. Beat up pretty bad. Police took 45 minutes to show up." Peterson's knuckles whitened around his fork. "That's when I decided to become a cop. To make things right. To take back what was ours." "The neighborhood wasn't yours to take back," Andre said gently. "It belongs to whoever lives there. That's how communities work." Peterson's expression hardened. "Easy for you to say. Your family didn't get pushed out?" "No," Andre agreed. "We were already there. My grandfather bought his house on Elm Street in 1953, paid twice what it was worth because no one else would sell to him, worked 3 jobs to keep it. My dad was born in that house. So was I." Peterson looked up, surprised. The same neighborhood changes that you saw as an invasion, my family saw as people finally being allowed to move in. Andre continued. Different perspective, same reality. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of history settling between them. That kid at the youth center, Peterson said suddenly. Tyler reminds me of myself at that age. Andre nodded. I noticed that too. He's got potential. Good instincts on the court. Peterson hesitated. Think he'd like to join the Junior Police Basketball League. Department sponsors it, but we never get many kids from that neighborhood. Maybe, Andre replied. But you'd have to ask his mother first. She works 2 jobs. Doesn't trust police much. Because of people like me, Peterson said quietly. Because of experiences she's had, Andre corrected, which you now have a chance to change. As they were finishing breakfast, Tony returned with refills and news. Your coffee shop showdown made the regional news last night, he told Andre. They're calling it a model for community police reconciliation. Reporter wants to interview both of you. Peterson nearly choked on his coffee. Interview? Lieutenant Rivera already called to tell me, Andre said. She thinks it could help the community initiative get more support. I'm not doing a TV interview, Peterson stated flatly. Tony laughed. Camera-shy officer? Or worried what your buddies on the force will say? Peterson's expression confirmed the latter. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone for a while, Tony said, his jovial tone giving way to something more serious. Ask Andre about his first week of SEAL training. Whole team turned against him because he helped the weakest guy finish a run instead of leaving him behind. Andre smiled at the memory. They called me a fool, said I was risking my own spot by slowing down. And now? Tony prompted. That weakest guy saved my life in Kandahar 2 years later, Andre replied. Best medic I ever served with. Peterson considered this. The department's not a team like that. It's complicated. All teams are complicated, Andre said. But they're still teams. And they can change. When I first joined my unit, there were guys who didn't want me there. Didn't think I belonged. Made assumptions about me based on nothing but what I looked like. What changed their minds? Peterson asked. Andre smiled slightly. I saved their asses a few times. And they saved mine. Hard to hold on to prejudice when someone's pulling you out of a firefight. Not many firefights in local policing, Peterson pointed out. No, but there are plenty of chances to show up for each other, and for the community. As they left the diner, Tony pressed a bag into Peterson's hands. Muffins for the road, blueberry, Andre's favorite. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving puddles reflecting the clearing sky. They stood by their cars, the conversation at the diner having shifted something between them. The interview, Andre said. You don't have to do it. Peterson sighed, looking down at the bag of muffins. What would you say? If you did it? I'd talk about how communities and police need each other. How trust goes both ways. How change happens one conversation, one basketball game, one breakfast at a time. Peterson was quiet for a long moment. My partner thinks I should request a transfer. Says this whole thing is a publicity stunt that'll blow over. Is that what you think? Andre asked. I don't know anymore. Peterson looked around the parking lot at the town he'd sworn to protect. 2 weeks ago, I was sure I knew how things worked. Who the good guys were, who the troublemakers were. Now you're not so sure. Andre finished for him. Peterson nodded slowly. Tyler asked if I'd come watch his school basketball game tomorrow night. Said he's starting point guard, Andre smiled. Are you going? I told him I would. Peterson hesitated. Would you come too? His mom might be more comfortable if you're there. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't even a direct apology. But in that moment, standing in a puddle-filled parking lot outside a small-town diner, Andre recognized it for what it was. A step forward. A hand reaching across a divide. Pick me up at 6, he said. We'll go together. As they drove away in separate cars, Andre thought about the journey they'd begun in that coffee shop 2 weeks ago. The lesson wasn't complete, might never be fully complete, but the first real chapter had been written. And sometimes, that was enough to change the story's ending. 3 months later, Andre stood at the airport gate, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His leave had ended weeks ago, but he'd managed to arrange one more weekend visit to wrap up loose ends before his next deployment. Behind him, the city skyline glittered in the early morning light. The taxi driver had taken the scenic route at Andre's request, allowing him one last look at the place that had always been home, despite his years away. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. Safe travels. Don't be a stranger this time. And then another message arrived, this one from Peterson. Meeting at 10. Don't miss your flight. Andre smiled. The meeting had been scheduled weeks ago, the final evaluation of the community policing initiative. Lieutenant Rivera had insisted he be there, flying him back for the weekend at the department's expense. Your perspective matters, she'd said. We need to know what worked and what didn't. The truth was, more had worked than anyone had expected. 2 hours later, Andre walked into the police station, nodding to familiar faces. 3 months ago, those same officers had watched him with suspicion or embarrassment. Now they greeted him with genuine respect. The conference room was already full. Chief Williams, Lieutenant Rivera, community leaders, and city officials. Peterson stood by the window looking more comfortable in his uniform than Andre had ever seen him. Our guest of honor has arrived, Chief Williams announced, gesturing Andre to an empty seat. Now we can begin. Lieutenant Rivera presented the statistics first. Community complaints down 30%. Officer response times improved in previously underserved neighborhoods. Youth participation in police-sponsored activities up by 50%. Numbers that told a story of progress, but not the whole story. But we didn't bring Andre back just to show him charts, Rivera concluded. We brought him here because this initiative began with a confrontation between two men and grew into something that has changed our entire department. She nodded to Peterson, who cleared his throat and stepped forward. 3 months ago, I approached a man in a coffee shop because of what he looked like. Not what he'd done, Peterson began, his voice steady. I'd like to say it was an isolated incident, a bad day. But it wasn't. It was the result of assumptions I'd carried for years. Assumptions about neighborhoods, about people, about threats that didn't exist. Andre watched, remembering the defensive, angry officer from that first day. Working with Andre and with many of you, Peterson continued, acknowledging the community leaders around the table, forced me to confront those assumptions, to see the damage they caused, not just to individuals I interacted with, but to the community's trust in all of us who wear this uniform. Chief Williams nodded soberly. Officer Peterson has submitted a proposal to extend the Community Liaison Program. He's volunteered to lead it, with ongoing input from the Youth Center and Neighborhood Council. Mrs. Washington from the Community Center spoke up. We've seen real change. Not just in programs, but in attitudes. When the Henderson boy's bike was stolen last month, his mother called the police right away. A year ago, she would never have done that. And we found the bike, Peterson added, because kids who knew something weren't afraid to talk to us. The meeting continued, discussing future plans and areas still needing improvement. Andre listened, occasionally offering suggestions based on team-building principles he'd learned in the military. As the meeting wrapped up, Chief Williams addressed Andre directly. Your leave is over, but this work continues. We'd like to keep you involved, even from a distance. Consultant status with a stipend for your time. I'd be honored, Andre replied, though my availability will be unpredictable. We understand, but your perspective has been invaluable. Outside the station afterward, Peterson walked Andre to his waiting taxi. Tyler made the all-city basketball team, Peterson said. His mom invited me to the celebration dinner next week. That's great, Andre smiled. How are things with the other officers? Peterson shrugged. Some have come around. Others think I've gone soft. It's a process. Always is. They stopped at the curb, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. I never properly apologized, Peterson said finally, for that day in the coffee shop. You've spent 3 months showing a better way, Andre replied. That's worth more than words, Peterson extended his hand. Thank you. For not just filing a complaint and walking away, for seeing something worth saving. Andre shook his hand firmly. Keep doing the work. It matters. As the taxi pulled away, Andre watched the police station recede in the rear window, thinking about journeys, the kind that took you around the world and back, and the kind that happened entirely within yourself. His phone buzzed with a message from Theo. Coffee before your flight? Riverside Brew in 30? 40 minutes later, Andre pushed open the door to the now familiar coffee shop. The bell jingled overhead, just as it had that first day 3 months ago. But this time, as heads turned toward the door, the glances were friendly, even admiring. Theo waved from a corner table where he sat with the barista from that first day, along with Mr. Ramsey from the youth center and a few other familiar faces. "Surprise send-off," Theo explained as Andre joined them. "Couldn't let you leave without a proper goodbye." The barista, whose name Andre had learned was Lily, slid a cup toward him. "Large dark roast. And yes, there's a blueberry muffin coming too." Andre laughed. "You all didn't have to do this." "Yes, we did," Mr. Ramsey said. "What started here changed things. Maybe not everything, not yet, but enough to matter." They chatted about neighborhood developments, the youth center's expanded hours, the new community garden on an abandoned lot, the joint police community basketball tournament scheduled for next month. The bell above the door jingled, and conversation paused momentarily as Officer Peterson walked in, now in civilian clothes. He hesitated, clearly not expecting the gathering. "Room for one more?" Theo called out, pulling over an empty chair. Peterson joined them, accepting a coffee from Lily with a genuine thank you that would have seemed impossible months ago. The conversation resumed, with Peterson joining in naturally, no longer an outsider. He and Mr. Ramsey discussed plans for the youth center's expansion. He asked Lily about her college classes. He even shared a joke that had everyone laughing. Andre sat back, watching the scene with a sense of quiet satisfaction. This people from different corners of the community talking, laughing, planning together, was what progress looked like. Not perfect, not complete, but real. As the gathering broke up, Andre found himself with a few minutes alone with Peterson. The interview aired last night. Peterson said, "My kids actually said they were proud of me. First time in a long while." Andre smiled. "They should be." The reporter asked if I regretted that day in the coffee shop. Peterson continued. "I told her no, not anymore." He looked around the bustling cafe. Without that moment, none of this change would have happened. Sometimes our worst mistakes lead to our best opportunities, Andre reflected. "If we're willing to learn from them." Peterson nodded. "I'll be sending updates. Let you know how things are progressing." "I'd like that." As Andre prepared to leave for the airport, a young officer Andre hadn't met before approached their table. She looked nervous. "Sir," she addressed Andre, "I just wanted to say, I joined the force last month. Your story, what happened here and what came after, was part of our training. It's changing how we think about our role in the community." Andre nodded his thanks, momentarily at a loss for words. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the streets as people went about their day. Shopkeepers chatted with customers on the sidewalk. A patrol car drove by slowly, the officer inside waving to a group of teenagers who waved back without hesitation. "Your sister said you'll be gone at least 6 months this time," Peterson said as they walked toward Andre's waiting taxi. "That's the plan, but I'll be back." "This place will be here," Peterson assured him. "Better than you left it if I have anything to say about it." As the taxi pulled away, Andre watched the town scroll past his window. The coffee shop, the youth center, the community garden, the neighborhoods that had shaped him, places that held both painful memories and new possibilities. His phone buzzed with a message from Lieutenant Rivera. "Committee voted. Initiative permanent. Funding approved." "You started something good here." Andre smiled, thinking about the long journey from that tense confrontation to today. The lesson hadn't just been for Peterson. It had been for an entire community. Learning that change was possible if you were brave enough to face uncomfortable truths and determined enough to work toward something better. As the taxi merged onto the highway toward the airport, Andre sent one final message to the group chat that had formed during his time home. "Not goodbye. Just see you later. Keep building." In the rearview mirror, his hometown receded, but the connections remained. Stronger, more honest, and full of promise for what might come next.